is one error. Look at number 5. It is so important that we as good detectives of literacy write down anything that we can observe about a child. This child might do this. The red car, and he says cat. And he notices something is not quite right. So he repeats. Why is it important to put the R for repeat? Because one of the strategies we must teach children is that when they're at a tricky part, they should go back to the very beginning of the sentence and begin the rereading. This tells us, by drawing a line back to where the child needs to start again, that we want to applaud that child. We are so pleased that they have used that strategy. And if they repeat and only go back one word, you would draw your line just to where they went back to. That tells you a lot. A repeat is not an error. It just tells you they're doing some good reading work. And we want to applaud that because we realize they've noticed something isn't quite right. Let's look at number 6 and see what happens. The child is reading along correctly, and then the child says cat over can and notices that isn't right, and he self-corrects. You will put a little SC next to the word. That is not an error, that is an applaud, because the more self-corrects the child is using, the better. It means that they are really beginning to apply their strategies, and we want to praise them so many times that they were able to independently correct their mistake, and it is not an error. So let's review for a moment. Child is reading correctly, you will use a mark, a check, or a slash. The child is reading along, makes an error. Child's word over the text. An omission, no word in the text, so it's just a blank on top of, it's a blank on top of the word in the text because the child did not say a word. And the same thing goes for insertion. The child's word on top, no word on the bottom. There was no text for that. The repeat, we want to note when the child notices something that is not quite right, how far back do they go in order to be able to correct and start going again. And the self-correct. Let's pretend in number 5 the child repeated and then reread. If he fixed his mistake, you would put the SC right here next to the R for repeat. That is terrific. And then finally, if the self-correct sits alone, we just put an SC next to it. Now, if the child is an advanced reader, if the child is going along too quickly and you just simply find that doing the ticks for every word is just too cumbersome, then only record the errors. That is just fine. What we want to look for in our errors, especially for the analysis for the case study, is what patterns do we see the child using? Oftentimes, if you look at these errors, you will see cat for can. What do you notice about the two words? They look very similar, don't they? They have the same beginning letters on both words. It really would be an easy assumption to say that this child is using the visual cueing system because he is making a prediction based on the letters and sounds, how similar they look. Now, because we don't have text in front of us, it's a little more difficult to realize, did it keep meaning going? Does it make sense to the story? But I can look through many struggling readers running records, and I often can assure you that you will see the pattern is that they fall back on one cueing system, and that typically is the graphophonic or the visual. And if it's hard to remember visual because you think that means a picture, then always say graphophonic. You hear the phonics part, the letter-sound connection. Often children will fall back on sounding out words. It is just this cueing system. And with that, you get all the way through the reading and you realize this child does not have comprehension because the reading sounded like this, very choppy. The, k, at, it's, g, o, e, m. And they don't hold on to a storyline. They don't think what is sounding right with the story. Does it make sense? Because they are so labored on just using the sounding out. If you are working with a child for your case study,